Hi dear students, hope you all are keeping fine. Be home and stay safe. Today we are going to start our higher secondary plus 2 computer science first chapter. Our first chapter is function. What is a function? Function is a set of code that works on many kind of inputs, or it can be told as function is a small set of code which is used for doing some specific task. Function is otherwise known as subroutines. Function is otherwise known as subroutines. So in this lesson, you will be learning about these things in this chapter. Function specification, parameter and arguments, difference between interface and implementation, pure function, side effects of impure function will be dealt in this lesson. Let us come to the introduction. We have already learned about algorithm. Algorithm, we know that it's a step-by-step procedure of solving a problem. So, in almost all the programming languages, we use the term algorithm, or we use the concept algorithm in order to simplify a program. It is just to know how the program will be evaluated. How will we get the output? What are the important functions to be used? What are the important formulas to be used? All these things will be dealt in the algorithm. So, if there are lot of statements repeated in a program, sometimes we need to do some same kind of actions again and again. So we know that in all the coding languages, that is programming languages, the statements, when it is repeated, the length of the program will be increased and it is very difficult to follow it. So we can change, or we can use the same coding repeatedly for any number of times. The same code can be repeated for any number of times. So that is what known as function, or it is otherwise known as subroutines. Bulk of statement repeated for several times to finish a task. It is what known as subroutines. Subroutine is otherwise known as what? The functions. So subroutines are the building block of any computer program. So without a function or without a subroutine, we cannot create any programming languages. So subroutines are also known as functions. Subroutines are also known as functions. So here we have the definition for function. A function contains a set of code that works on many kind of input like variables, expressions, and produces a concrete output, a perfect output. Another definition what we can give to function in Python is a function is a set of statements that take inputs, do some specific computation and produces output. The idea is to put some commonly or repeatedly done task together and make a function. So that instead of writing the same code again and again for different inputs, we can call the same function. So function is mainly used for doing a particular task for a repeated number of times. The next topic what we are going to see is function specification. So in function specification, we have two concepts. One is expression and other one is definition. What is an expression? So in the example, you can see a colon equal to 24. It is an expression. When we assign a value to a variable, that is known as what? An expression. A colon equal to 24. We use a assignment operator here and a variable and a value. So this value 24 is being assigned to the value A. So it is known as an expression. So what is definition then? Definitions binds the value to the name. Definitions binds the value to the name. Binds the value to the name. So here the value is 24 and the name is A. But we cannot say that definitions are not expression. And at the same time, we cannot say that expressions are not treated as definition. Both can be treated as definitions or expressions. That is, an expression can be nested inside a definition, or a definition can be nested inside expression. Our next topic is parameters and arguments. Parameters are the variables used in function definition. The variables used in the function definition is known as parameter. So as we discussed here, A is the parameter. A is the parameter. And the arguments are the values which are passed to a function definition. The values which are passed to a function definition is known as arguments. So here in this case, it's 24. So when we are assigning A equal to 24, A is a parameter and 24 is the argument. Parameters are otherwise known as variables and values are otherwise known as arguments. Values are otherwise known as arguments. A parameter is the variable listed inside the parenthesis in the function definition. An argument is the value that is sent to the function when it is called. So here, y is the parameter and 2 is the argument. Y is the parameter or variable and 2 is the argument. In Python programming, parameters can be defined or declared in two ways. First one is parameter without type and second one is parameter with type. Parameter without type is referred that you just have to assign a variable without giving or without mentioning any kind of data types. We need not mention any data types. Parameter with type, we have to assign the particular data type or particular value what is to be stored, that is defined with the help of the data type. So a variable when or a parameter when it is defined, it should be defined with a data type as what value will be stored in it. But when we are not declaring any data type, any value or any type of value can be stored in it. So in the types of parameters, first we are going to discuss about parameter without type. So let us see an example. So here we have an example in our syllabus, in our textbook, requires b greater than equal to 0. Returns a to the power of b. Let rec power a b colon equal to. If b is equal to 0, then 1, else a asterisk power a into b minus 1. So here we have two parameters. We have two parameters. One is a and other one is b. One is a and other one is b. So the values which are passed will be stored in the variable b. Will be stored in the variable b. So here we have two conditions. One is precondition, that is known as, or that is declared as requires, and the other condition is post condition, that is declared as returns. So what value is returned is known as the post condition, and the condition what we are giving is known as what? Precondition. So here we have not mentioned any data type to A or B parameters. We have not mentioned any kind of data types. It was because some programming languages, some compilers will accept the values given or taken by the parameters and solve it by themselves. Some compilers solves the issue of data type of a parameter by itself. So in Python programming also, the compiler solves the problem of the data type even if it is not mentioned. Even if it is not mentioned. The next type is parameter with data type. Parameter with data type. Same as the above example, a particular example is mentioned here. The same type of example is mentioned here, but only one difference is that A and B parameters are mentioned with data type. A and B parameters are mentioned with data type. So here the data type mentioned is int. That means integer. It can take only integer values or numerical values. A and B parameters are assigned or declared as integer type, so as they can take only the integer values or numerical values. What is recursive function in Python? A recursive function is a function defined in terms of itself. This means that the function will continue to call itself and repeat its behavior until some condition is met to return a result. So recursive function is a function, it calls itself until a particular condition is satisfied. Since we learned the lesson functions, we have to know how to declare a function. It is very similar as how we declare a formula in maths. In order to do some mathematical calculations, we use or we follow some specific formulas in maths. Same way, in order to introduce or in order to declare a function, we use the keyword let. We use the keyword let, and we have to give a particular name to the function. A particular name to the function. So after giving the keyword, we have to give a name for the function. The next one is arguments. So how the values are passed? We have already discussed about arguments. So arguments are the channels through which the values are passed. So in order to pass the values, we need arguments. So first we have to define a keyword let preceded by the name and then the arguments. The formula that computes the image of the argument is written after the equal to sign. So after the arguments, you have to give a equal to sign. After the argument, you have to give a equal to sign. That is, after the computation, where the value will be stored, is assigned by a equal to sign. If you want to repeat the same function, instead of the keyword let, you have to use the keyword let rac. Let rac. Rac is nothing but recursive function. Recursive function. Recursive function is a function that calls itself. Recursive function is a function that calls itself. So if you want to make a function recursive, we have to use the keyword let rac, let recursive. How to define a function? The syntax to define a function is given here. Syntax to define a function is here. Let rac fn, fn a1 a2 until an equal to k. So here let rac is the keyword, fn is the function name, a1 a2 till an are the arguments, and after the equal to sign we have a k where we store the value. The next topic what we are going to see is interface versus implementation. What is an interface? An interface is a set of action that an object can do. An interface is a set of action that an object can do. So when we press a light switch, the light goes on. So that action, the light glows, that action is known as the interface. So in all programming languages, especially in object-oriented programming languages, interface is a description of all function that a class must have in order to be a new interface. In object-oriented programming, an interface is a description of all function that a class must have in order to be a new interface. So what type of action a class or a function must take, that is described as interface. So the purpose of an interface is to allow the computer to enforce the properties of the class type. So what property or what does a class should do, that is enforced by the interface. That is the purpose of interface. The difference between interface and implementation. Interface just defines what an object can do but won't do actually. Implementation carries out the instructions defined in the interface. So from the difference we can understand that interface is just defining the action but it won't be doing. It's just to define what to do. But the instruction is carried out by implementation. The instruction is carried out by the implementation. The actions are performed by implementation. Characteristics of interface. The class template specifies the interfaces to enable an object to be created and operated properly. An object's attributes and behavior is controlled by sending functions to the object. So the first point is, if we are creating an object, the function of an object, how it works, whether it is working properly, is checked by the interface. Is checked by the interface. An object's overall operation is controlled by the interface. Second point, an object's attributes and behavior, the characteristics of an object, is controlled by sending functions to that object. So what it should do, what the object should do, is controlled by sending the instructions via functions. Here is an example for interface and implementation. A person who drives a car does not care about the internal working. Sometimes you all may drive a car or ride a motorbike, but we never care about what's happening within the engine. We just apply the brake, we just apply the accelerator, etc., etc. But we never care about what happens within the engine. So here, accelerator acts as an interface between the driver and the engine. Between the driver and the engine. So when the driver apply the accelerator, the speed of the car increases. Here the driver is just applying the accelerator. So it is the interface. And when the driver applies the accelerator, the car goes faster. The car goes faster. It is known as implementation. It is known as implementation. There are two types of functions, pure function and impure function. Now we are going to see about pure function. Pure functions are functions which will give exact result when the same arguments are passed. Pure functions are functions which will give exact result when the same arguments are passed. When we give a same value, we get the same result always. Example, the function sine in max. Sine 0 is always 0. Whenever we give the value 0 to the sine function, it gives us the result 0. Another example, we know pi, the value of pi, 22/7. The value of pi is never going to be changed. So such functions are known as pure functions. Any number of times the function is called with the same argument, the value will be the same. A function can be pure function provided it with not having any external variables. So if there is no external variable provided to a function, it can be a pure function. What is external variable? External variable is nothing but we can give or allot different values at different runtime. Different values at different runtime. But internal variable is a value assigned to a variable and it will be the same until the end of the program. So in a pure function, internal variables are used. That means the same argument or same values are passed in that function again and again. So here we have an example. Let's square x. Square x. The function is a pure function because it will not give different result for the same input. So when you are giving a value to x, you will be getting the same result any number of time. Suppose you are giving the value for x as 2, you will be getting the square as 4. Suppose if you are giving 4, you will be getting 16. So the function will give you exact result. The function will give exact result. There are several advantages using this pure function. One of the advantages using this pure function is it can be called several times with the same argument. The compiler needs to actually call the function once. So several values or several times you can call it, but the compiler actually want to call only once. So the work of the compiler will be reduced into one, but you get several results. What is a pure function in Python? A function is called pure function if it always returns the same result for the same argument values and it has no side effects like modifying an argument or outputting something. The only result of calling a pure function is the return value. For example, pure functions are string length, power function, square root, etc. So you know that square root of a value will be the same always. Impure function. Impure functions are those functions which have a variable as external variable. So that means the variable can take any value at any time. An external variable can take any value at any time. So there is no stability in the output. When you get the result of an impure function, there will be no stability. So that is what the side effect of impure function. We cannot predict the stability of the function. We cannot say that we will be getting the same result each time the function is called. In mathematical function, random function is an example. So when we use random function, we know that each time when we randomly select a value, any value can be selected. Each time when we use the function, we may not get the same result. So the variable used inside the function may cause side effect, though the function which are not passed with any arguments. So the values or the variables inside the function make the change as pure function or impure function. The last topic of our first lesson. Difference between pure function and impure function. Pure function. The return value of the pure function depends on its arguments passed. Hence, if you call the pure function with the same set of arguments, you will always get the same return values. Impure function. The return value of the impure function does not depend on its arguments passed. Hence, if you call the impure function with the same set of arguments, you might get the different return values. For example, random date. They have side effects. So, when we make a difference between pure function and impure function. Pure function returns the same value if we are using the same set of arguments. Impure function does not give the same value even though the same set of arguments are called. So pure function does not have any side effects since we get the exact result each time you call the function. But impure function have some side effects such as you may not get the same exact result whenever you call it. The next difference is that they do not modify the arguments which are passed to them. Pure function does not modify the arguments which are passed to them. They never make changes in the arguments. But impure functions make changes in the arguments which are passed to them. They modify it, they change it. They can make some kind of modification. So that is why impure function will not give us the same result when each time the function is called. But since pure functions, the arguments are not made any change or modified, you will get the same result each time you call the same set of arguments.